So 2006, when I got married, I got fitted for a wedding ring, and it was perfect when I got fitted for it. But when the fall came and the weather got a bit colder, you know, your hand shrinks, and I was doing yard work, and the ring flew right off my finger. And I enlisted a bunch of people to help me look for it, you know, got metal detectors out. I never found it. I was devastated. And, you know, there's that fear and trepidation when you go up to your new wife and you say, I lost my wedding ring. And she was like, no big deal. And I was like, you know, and I said, you know what, why so much grace? And she said, because now if I lose mine, you already lost yours. So, you know, I said, yeah, but yours costs like 10 times more than mine. But isn't it true that losing something is unsettling, right? Whether it's a remote control, because then you gotta like get up and change a channel. When you lose your wallet, that's a terrible feeling, right? You're like, oh, where's my wallet? And you just assume that somebody took it and they're using your credit cards to buy like big screen TVs with a nice remote control. And when you lose your kids, like it's just losing things. Losing things is unsettling, but isn't this true that losing someone is awful? So several months ago, back in the fall, we forgot to pick up my kid from school. And it would be okay if it were the elementary school right across the street, but it was the middle school, which is, I think, like maybe 2 miles away. And we can't find him anywhere. He tried calling us, but we didn't pick up. And so, you know, she goes down to the school, is looking all over for him, can't find him anywhere. We're beginning to panic. I get in the car and drive down South Hamilton here, heart pounding, you know, and I discovered later on that he was actually right by the Walmart Home Depot sign, like saying, Dad. But I was like determined, like when's the green, you know, the light gonna turn green, and not even paying attention. I got on Painted Post. We're looking all over for him, can't find him anywhere. Well, eventually she ended up finding him, you know, just a little bit beyond that sign. And it was just relief. And, you know, here he is. He made it. He's in the sound booth over there. So we're grateful that we found him. Whew. Now, it's one thing to lose a 13-year-old. But when you lose a 3-year-old, I mean, that's like she's fast and she's curious. And, you know, I'll be at Walmart, right? And I'm like, oh, no. And it's like 5 seconds of terror, right? Because she went into the other aisle. I could tell you a bunch more stories, but you're already judging my parenting right now, so we'll just move on. So, you know, today we're going to talk about finding God, and here's the question I want to deal with is, how do I find, or if this is a word, re-find God? Because some of you, maybe you're here, you're not even sure if there's a God to be found. And you're kind of wrestling with, is there even a God out there? Some of you do believe in God. You're a Christian, but you feel like your passion has subsided for a certain period of time and you want to get back to God, but you're like, how do I find God? How do I get back into that close relationship with the Lord? And so that's really what this 21 days of prayer and fasting is all about, is kind of finding God, hopefully, if you're not even sure he exists. Those of us who do follow him, kind of reigniting our passion for the Lord. So the passage we're going to look at today is Jeremiah 29, verses 1 through 13. I'm going to walk you verse by verse through this extraordinary passage. But before I do, I want to give you some historical context. I've given you this context many times throughout the years, but if you're new today or maybe you forget the context, let me give you a quick nutshell. So the year is 597 BC. King Nebuchadnezzar is the leader of Babylon, right? And he would typically go into a city and take out the craftsmen and the artisans and all of the people who were gifted so that he could bring them back to Babylon, teach them the Babylonian ways, and then repopulate them throughout the empire to extend the mighty Babylonian empire. So he goes in, takes out thousands of people, deports them from Jerusalem to Babylon, and then a few years later in 586 BC, he gets his army to surround the city of Jerusalem, doesn't let anyone out, and doesn't let anyone in. And so people are starving, and there's cannibalism, and it's just awful. You can read about this in the book of Lamentations. But he takes thousands of these people out of their hometown of Jerusalem and brings them about 900 miles to the capital of the empire, the city of Babylon. And it takes about 4 months to make this walk. If you can imagine, you're in chains. You've got taskmasters making sure you don't run away. For 4 months, you finally get to Babylon, and you, as a Jewish exile, are devastated. You're devastated. These are some of the things that would come out of your mouth or some of your experiences when you get to Babylon. By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and we wept when we remembered Zion, which is another name for Jerusalem. Right? For there, our captors asked for songs, our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, stop being so depressed and sing us one of those songs of Zion that you learned as a child. Pick up your harp or pick up your guitar and, stop being so sad. But we responded, how can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. Jerusalem was everything to them. This was the holy city. This was God's country, right? Every time they went into Jerusalem, they saw the temple with the gold glistening in the sun. It was this massive, beautiful building that reminded them of the glory and the grandeur of God, reminded them that they were God's chosen people, and yet they were taken against their will to the city of Babylon, and they hated it. The second thing to remember before we jump into this passage is that there are a bunch of false prophets, people who are saying, I'm speaking on behalf of God, and this was their message, my words, not there. Babylon will soon be gone. So I know all of you Jewish captives are sitting in refugee camps, but you're only going to be there for a few weeks. No big deal. God's going to send a lightning bolt to take out the Babylonians, and you'll be able to get back into Babylon. Easy, quick, no problem. So Jeremiah hears about these false prophets, and one day he pulls out his pen and he writes a letter to the leaders, to the nobles, to the priests, to all of the people living as captives in Babylon. And this letter that was written by Jeremiah, it makes its way over to the captives living in Babylon, and this letter would be included in the book of Jeremiah. So we're going to take a look at part of this letter that's written to those captives who are depressed, who are discouraged, do not want to be in Babylon. This is what he says. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. And they're like, whoa. I don't want to settle down here. I hate this place. I don't like the Babylonians. I don't like their food. I don't like their customs. I don't like anything about Babylon. Matter of fact, I want to buy an RV so that when God strikes Babylon with his lightning, I can get in my RV and hustle back to Jerusalem. When I think of Babylon, I think, ooh. And God's like, I'm not through. I want you to not only settle down, but I want you to plant gardens and eat what they produce. And they're like, I ain't eating any of that Babylonian produce. I don't want to even touch Babylonian broccoli and peppers and cabbage and lettuce. That stuff is off limits. I have no interest in partaking of their way of life. And God says, well, I got some more instructions for you. I want you to marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there. Do not decrease. And also, I want you to seek the peace and the prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. You think it's the Babylonians who have carried you into exile, but I am the sovereign God that is using Babylon as my instrument of judgment because the Israelites have been disobeying him so many times, year after year after year. I'm the one who has carried you into exile, and you need to seek the prosperity of the city. Now, when I first read this, I thought of one of the greatest movies of all time, right? Which is Cars. And here you have Lightning McQueen, right? He's like this cocky race car, best race car on the planet, thinks he's better than everybody else. He's on his way to California to win the Piston Cup. Through a series of circumstances, he ends up finding himself in Radiator Springs in captivity behind a fence with a boot on his wheel, and he cannot get out, and he's looking at rusty old Mater with a feeling of detest. Like, I don't want to be around you people. I need to be getting to California so I can win the Piston Cup. You remember that scene where he's got to like repair the road and he's just like, get me out of here. I don't want to be in this captivity. And I think that's what many of the Israelites are thinking as they're sitting in Babylon, just hoping that they get out. But God says to them through the prophet Jeremiah, he says, seek the peace and the prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. And also, I want you to pray to the Lord for it. Oh, no. I don't pray for them. I'm not going to pray for these Babylonians. He's like, yes, you are. Pray for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. And yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. So apparently you've got some of these Israelites who go up to a prophet and they say, okay, you're God's prophet, right? Why don't you go out and have a vision or have a dream that gets us out of here quickly? And God says, they are prophesying lies to you in my name, and I have not sent them, declares the Lord. So settle down and build houses and eat their produce and seek the prosperity of the city of Babylon. And now, God's about to drop the bomb. This is the last thing these captives want to hear. You ready for this? This is what God says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my gracious promise to you and bring you back to this place. 70 years. You know what that means? That means all of the adults reading this letter, they're not making it back to Babylon. Because people didn't live that long these days, their children aren't making it back to Babylon either. It's their grandchildren who are going to make it back to Babylon. 70 years. I mean, think about this. Those of you who are in middle school, high school right now, or even college, and you're like, I cannot wait to get out of this school. You got like 3, 4, maybe 7 years till you can get out. These people got 70 years that they're called by God to thrive in Babylon. And they're like, that's a tough message. That's tough, because every morning when I look out the window, I see these Babylonian parades going by after they conquer a city. And instead of seeing the Jewish temple that reminds me of the greatness of God, I got to look at this pagan temple to Marduk, and it makes me sick to my stomach. And not only that, but the leader's a crazy man, right? Nebuchadnezzar, he was so crazy that one day he constructed a giant golden statue and told all of his leaders, once you hear the sound of the flute and the lyre and those are instruments, you got to bow down to this golden statue. Well, there were 3 guys that refused to bow down to the golden statue, and they got thrown into the fiery furnace, but miraculously God saved them from that fiery furnace. And when I saw this, I think about this. You know how some of us, we like to complain about our leaders, complain about politicians and lawmakers? If those people living in Babylon in 586 BC were to hear our complaints about our leaders, they would be like, you serious? Let me tell you about Nebuchadnezzar, right? So, don't miss this. 70 years, you're not leaving Babylon. Even though you're struggling with this whole message, you're not making it back to Jerusalem. So in the middle of this very, very difficult message, God's now going to give them some comfort, right? And this is probably one of the most popular verses in the entire Old Testament. This is a verse that has given you lots and lots of comfort. But again, it comes in the context of 70 years. Here's what Jeremiah says to bring them some comfort. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in a future. Even though you don't want to be in Babylon, you can have a future. You can have hope. Even though you'd rather be out of this city and back in Jerusalem, you can still seek the prosperity of the city. You can still experience the blessing of God. And then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you, and you will seek me and find me when? Now, I want to stop right here because this is huge. This answers the question I started out this sermon. how do I find God? Okay, so some of you in this room, trying to find God. You want it to be true, but you're kind of wrestling, is it true? Or maybe you've got a relationship with God, but it's stale, and you're thinking, how do I regain that passion? How do I find God? How do I get more of God in my life? This is the answer to this question. You ready? And this is kind of the big idea for this whole 21 days. Here it is. Seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. Not half-hearted attempts, but all your heart. When my son was lost several months ago, and I went looking for him, and I couldn't find him, I didn't say, you know what, Jen, let's just kind of give up. Let's go home. We can't find him. He's gone. Right? No, I sought him with all my heart. I got in that car. I mean, I was about to pass people on like a road that, goes in. I did everything I could to try to find him. That's what it means to seek God with all your heart, to keep going after him. And when you think about these 21 days, there are going to be moments where you're like, I don't really want to get up early. Not really sure I want to stay up a little later. You remember that if you want to find him, you got to seek him with all your heart. You got to go after him. You got to pursue him with everything you got. And here's the promise. When you do that, when you seek him with all your heart, I'll be found by you. So here's my big idea. Seek God with all your heart, regardless of your setting. I think a lot of times we blame our setting. Man, once my kids get older, right? Once they're out of the house, then I can seek the Lord. Because right now, they drive me nuts. I can't seek anyone because I need to seek a psychologist, right? Or remember like when your kids were little and they would take a nap and you'd be like, oh, this is my time to seek the Lord, but then they don't take a nap anymore? Or man, when I get out of this city, or when I can go down to Florida with all my snowbird friends, then I can seek the Lord. When the weather changes so I can get outside in the trails, then I can seek the Lord. This is the message, regardless of your circumstances. If you're in Babylon and you don't want to be there, if you got a job and you don't like your boss, seek the Lord. Seek him, and you'll find him. That's a great promise, right? So seek God with all your heart. These are the three things that I'm going to challenge you to do over the course of the next 21 days. Right? Three things. Number one, I'm going to ask you to fast. And here's my challenge. Pick one thing that you feel like maybe you're a little bit addicted to it. Maybe not like a strong addiction, but it's like, I got to have this. I got to scroll. I got to get this. What if you took 21 days and you just fasted from that? Maybe it's social media. Maybe it's junk food. Maybe it's your phone. Maybe it's Netflix. Just put it aside. Not forever, but just for 21 days. I like to say fasting is turning down the voice of the flesh and turning up the voice of the Spirit. Turning away the distractions and taking some time to seek the Lord with all of my heart. So what can you fast from for the next 21 days that you might seek him with all of your heart? The second one is that you would grab a journal, a book. Hopefully you have one already. If you don't have one, you can grab one on the information desk, and that you would pick a time and a place. So where are you going to do it tomorrow, and when are you going to do it? Is it 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, 10 in the morning, lunchtime, 9 o'clock at night? You got to have a time and you got to have a place. It's going to be that green chair, that red chair. It's going to be in this room. If you can tell me where you're going to do it and when you're going to do it, you stand a much higher chance of actually doing it. And the last thing is that you would pray. You say, well, what do I pray for? Pray for your city. Pray for your town. Pray for your school. Pray for your workplace. And then seek the prosperity of your city. See, I can't guarantee you that certain results are going to happen as a result of this. I can't guarantee you that, you'll be a new person. But I can guarantee you one thing, you won't regret it. You're not going to regret this. At the end of this 21 days, you're not going to say, you know what, I wish I had eaten a little bit more junk food. I wish I had spent a little more time on my phone and watching Netflix and doing social media. Nobody's going to say, you know what, I spent a little too much time praying the last 21 days. I wish I had spent more time, doing whatever. You're not going to regret it. Matter of fact, I can guarantee this. You won't lose anything valuable by doing this, but you might find someone invaluable. You might experience God in a new way and find him to be invaluable in your life. So will you seek him with all of your heart? Will you go after him even when you get distracted, even when you find yourself being a little bored? But you would keep on pursuing him because he says, when you do that, I'll be found by you. Okay, 70 years later, after this prophecy of Jeremiah, we have Ezra who records the history of what happens. You know, God does keep his promises, doesn't he? He's a promise keeper. Never breaks his promises. So after their 70 years of captivity, many of them come back into the land. This is how Ezra describes it. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, so the Persians defeat the Babylonians, and they're the new world empire. In order to fill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, right? Again, we see God's activity. It looks like Nebuchadnezzar's in charge. It looks like Persia and Cyrus are in charge, but really God's been in charge the entire time. God moves the heart of, this is amazing. He moves the heart of this pagan king who doesn't get anything from allowing them to go back into Jerusalem. Move the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and to put it in writing. This is what King Cyrus of Persia says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. Right? This is amazing. God gave me the kingdoms. God gave me this empire. And he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah. So, any one of his people among you, may his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem and Judah and build the temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem. That's amazing. Not only does he give the Jewish captives permission to go back to Jerusalem, he gives them provision. It's one thing to say, yeah, you can go, but it's another thing to say, I'll fund it. Right? This is what he does. People of any place where survivors may now be living are to provide him with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with freewill offerings for the temple of God in Jerusalem. So the captives head back, and Ezra leads them, begins to rebuild the people's faith. And then years later, a young man who grew up in captivity would later on attain a position of power. And Nehemiah would also get permission and provision to lead captives back into Jerusalem where he would rebuild the walls. The Persians were defeated by the Greeks, and the Greeks got defeated by the Romans. And when you open up the pages of the New Testament, though the Jewish people are back in their land, they're still living in captivity under the Romans. And even though they're able to see this amazing temple that's been refurbished by Herod, and the temple is glistening in the sun, the religious leaders were called by Jesus hypocrites and men like whitewashed tombs. On the outside, you look good, but on the inside, you're like dead men's bones. And this is what we discover, that their lack of seeking God was not an environment issue, it was a heart issue. Whether you're in Babylon or whether you're in Jerusalem, it's not a location issue. It's a heart issue. And Jeremiah talked about this in 17 verse 9. He said, the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? Right? Our hearts lie to us that the reason we don't seek God is because of our environment, because of our circumstances. And Jeremiah says, no, it's a heart issue. And then he would write several chapters later this amazing future coming of a new covenant. He said, the time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant, a new agreement, a new treaty. It'll be a new relationship. It will not be like the covenant that I made with their forefathers when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt. It won't be like that covenant that when the Israelites got free from Egyptian captivity and wandered in the wilderness and then went into the promised land, that they had the law of God, but it wasn't written on their hearts, and so they broke the law time after time after time. And so Jeremiah says that old covenant is not working, so God is going to give you a new covenant where it will be a heart change. It won't just be this external thing where you're trying to follow it. It will be where God literally changes your heart. The prophet Ezekiel, who also prophesied in Babylon to the captives, would describe it like this: I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. And I will remove from your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. Remember that scene in Narnia where Mr. Tumnus is turned to stone? And then Aslan, the lion, comes and breathes on him and brings him back to life. This is what Jeremiah, this is what Ezekiel were prophesying, that there is a new covenant coming that's going to change you from the inside out. And part of this covenant would also be this: for I will forgive their wickedness and remember their sins no more. So here's Jesus in the upper room with his disciples, right? They think they're celebrating the old covenant, Passover, being released from captivity in Egypt, the blood of the lamb that was painted above their doorpost to allow them to get into freedom. But Jesus, in that moment where they're celebrating Passover, would celebrate the new covenant in his blood, which is poured out for you. And you would be forgiven. And that's what we celebrate every single time we do communion. So there's a cup in the seat in front of you. On the metal tray, you'll be able to grab one of those cups that look just like this. And I want to ask you to go ahead and take the top off and put the little piece of bread in your hand. And as you do that, the Apostle Paul instructed the church at Corinth of how to celebrate communion, so we're going to do that. He says to them, a man ought to examine himself before he eats of the bread and drinks of the cup. And so I want to give you a moment to just pause before the Lord, to seek him with all of your heart, and to confess your sins to God, specifically to confess your lack of seeking him. So go ahead and take a moment to be silent before the Lord and to confess your sins to God.